If you can't already tell, it's a nice rainy day here in Ohio, so we're going to start with part 7. As you can tell, we've got the new rear fender in place. Already got the turn signals installed as well as the fender bag. You'll notice I have not installed that rear tail light yet. A few reasons why. I've had a lot of people comment, why don't I use the stock tail light? Well, there's a couple reasons. First of all, I don't have a stock tail light. This only came with that Tusk system. Second of all, the stock tail light is not a brake light, it's just a running light. But there's some good news. You can actually make that into a brake light. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the bike, that rear light on the back of the XRs that are not a street legal model as far as an L, that's just a running light like you would have on an ATV. You press the brakes, it does nothing. So what I went ahead and done is ordered a factory tail light. Now I can add a third wire to that to make it a brake light. And then I could also change the bulb out for an LED. I think I'm going to like that a lot better. And I'm going to come up with some kind of bracket to mount the license plate. Now that Tusk kit, the light that goes back there, it already has a mount for the license plate as well as a light for the license plate. I'm not really concerned about riding at night, so I don't really need anybody to see the license plate. But we're still going to come up with something. We're not going to have a light on it. And Ohio's fairly lenient, so if I were to get followed by a cop, it's not likely they would give me a ticket for not having a light on the license plate. They would give me a ticket for not having a brake light. As far as the wiring, now I didn't show it on camera because every bike is different, but we've got that all cleaned up. Now I did decide to keep some butt connectors on there. Reason being, if I ever need to take off this rear fender, it'll be easy to do so. So this is nice and clean, minus the brake light, which is the plug right here. What I'll end up doing is cutting the other end of the Tusk light off and wiring that into the factory running light. Onto the front here, if you haven't already watched the Trail Tech Vapor install, you might want to do that. I think it's a pretty good video. Gives you a good idea of what it takes to install one of these. They're really easy to install, a lot of great features. I'm really pleased with that. Also, I have replaced all the mismatched bolts. They're all brand new. And if you notice the wiring, these 3 wires here for the headlight, still got to finish that. And then we've got our turn signal wires. Everything else is right here. I had a pile that I cut out of there, and we've got it taped up right here and wire tied to the oil hose. And you can see nothing is binding, everything is nice and completely flat. I'm really pleased. Not a big mess of wires hidden under the headlight or anything like that. Here are the Vapor Tech wires right here. So now we'll move on to actually putting the headlight on. Now this was the original setup, which is in a Cherubeast DHH. Really nice headlight. The one thing I don't like about it are these straps. They were actually a little bit too big for these fork tubes. So what the previous owner had done was he was actually wire tying it to the fork tubes. It looked horrible. Also, a couple other things about this. I was missing the clip that holds the light in, the actual bulb, and the previous owner just had it taped in place with duct tape. And last but not least, there's really no way to actually adjust the beam of the light. There's no adjustment. You have to adjust the whole assembly. So I wanted to go ahead and get a different model. I do like the look of this, but the one I have now I like a lot better. Here's the new one. It's a little bit smaller. It's a Polo Sport, but I like the fact that there are multiple adjustments on the straps. I don't have to wire tie anything, and it stays in there perfectly. Also, I've got the clip that I needed, and if you'll notice, there's a screw right here. I can adjust the throw of the light, which I couldn't do before. And you'll see there's a turn signal. Now, this didn't come with turn signals, but I decided to change that up as well. If you remember in the previous video, we talked about them being on the handguards. I didn't like. So we ordered some turn signals for the front. And what's also nice about this is there's a hole already for it from the factory. Now I did have to notch out the bracket a bit right here, but that was it. We're going to go ahead and install these turn signals, and then we can get this wired up and mounted. Now here are the turn signals we went with. They're just a Tusk. I think they were $20 or $18 a pair. These are the small versions. So what we'll go ahead and do here is we'll take the lock washer and nut off, and all we have to do is insert them into the hole of the assembly. Put our washer and nut back on, and then tighten them down. Now I could get a little spacer to make these stick out a bit further, but I think I like them just how they are. Once we have everything wired up, we can wire tie everything together. I'm not going to cut these down just because it's not necessary. I've already removed a ton of the slop. So we'll make a nice little pile here, wire tie them together, and then we can finish up the light. Now that we have the wiring the way that we want it, we can go ahead and mount the whole assembly. Figure out where you want it. That's about where I want it, right there. And then we simply just, actually I'm going to make it as high as it'll go. And then we simply just pull the straps and lock them in place. This seems to be a huge upgrade over the chair beast model. This is not moving at all, and I only got one side on. The other one just would flop. Now that we have everything installed, we're going to go ahead and test the turn signals. Now I won't be able to test the actual light just yet, because the way I've got it wired up, you actually have to have the bike running for the light to initially come on. So I've got it running to the stator, but also to the battery. So just running mode, it's to the stator. High and low are to the battery. It's kind of confusing the way I have it, but this way I'm not killing the battery, and it'll run whether I have the switch on or off. Now, if I do turn the switch on with the bike on and then turn it off, it will shut the system off. But if I never turn the switch on, start the bike, it'll just run off the stator all day long. There's our right turn signal. In the back, you can see the right turn signal and the left turn signal. Now, once we have this rear brake light in place and our license plate mounted, we'll be 99% done. There's a few little odds and ends we have to do. I forgot to mention, the reason why I'm not going to start the bike is we drained the oil. We still have not put oil in this bike. It's bone dry. I want to change the filter, the screen, everything else, and we'll get that on video as well. Since we're still waiting on parts, we're going to add a few little accessories here. Went ahead and got a few more replacement parts. Didn't necessarily need some of these, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Now we're also going to install new front brake pads. In order to put the pads on, you do not have to take the caliper off, but I went ahead and did so because we have new bolts for them. Depending on your bike, this one has a little screw that hides the pin. It's an actual Allen to take the pads off, or to take the pin out of the pads rather. Once you get that little cover off, you can go ahead and remove the pin. Probably should have got new pins too. We'll polish this up a little bit so the pads can ride freely. This is the reason why I wanted to get new pads. They're a bit worn. They still have a little bit of life on them, but since we've got the bike apart, we might as well. Before we do anything else, we're going to set one of the bolt pads in place and take our C-clamp and push the pistons back in. Now, depending on how much brake fluid you have in your master cylinder, you may need to open up the cap and you may need to bleed a little brake fluid off. But ours is not full, so we can go ahead and do this. And if you can see here, what I'm doing is just using the old pad and pressing down to get that piston fully seated so we have enough room for the new pad. Now we've got the pin polished up. Just polished it up with a wire wheel, and we put a very, very thin coat of grease on there. We also have our pads. We've cleaned them off. Now they are ready to install. Go ahead and set them in place. Like such. Thread your pin. Now we got the pin in place, the pad in place, and we can reassemble it onto. Now the rear brakes are really good, but we've got a new set and we're going to replace them. Same thing as the front. We have a cap that hides the Allen head screw. And we'll attempt to do this without removing the caliper. Now the one tricky thing is, depending on how far our pistons are out, we may have to come up with a creative way to get those back in. Yes, and this is a much newer pen. Still needs a little bit of buffing and some grease. But here are the pads. You just pull them out like that, and you don't have to remove the rear wheel. Now all we have to do is install our other pad. Make sure it is seated correctly. Make sure everything is seated correctly. Now you may have to hold these up as you push the pen in, and go ahead and got a few more other little goodies to put on here. Here's these rim locks. I did not like the standard nut and bolt, so we're going to put some aftermarket ones on to match the sprocket, a couple of the other things. Now these were on sale at Rocky Mountain for I think $7, so I figured I couldn't really go wrong. There we go. One of the last things we're going to do in this video is change the oil and filter. Now if you've been following this series, we've already drained all the oil because we had to replace the drain plug. So we're going to go ahead and take the filter cover off. Now there will be some oil left over in here. And we're going to inspect this filter. Now the previous owner said it was just changed. So if it looks good, we may reuse the filter, but he gave me like 4 extra ones, so I may just change it anyway. Now I do have a catch tank down here. And it looks okay, but we're going to go ahead and replace it. Like I said, I've got 4 extras, so it's not going to hurt. Here's our new filter. We'll go ahead and pour a little bit of oil in the middle of it. Go ahead and put that in place. And then we'll replace our cap. And last, but certainly not least, we're going to go ahead and fill it up. We've got a big spout here. Here's our oil. Now this takes about 1.5 quarts with the filter changed. So this bottle is approximately half full. So there's 2 quarts in here, so we're going to leave about 1/4 of the bottle in the bottom. And just start pouring. Now one thing to look out for is pour slowly. If you pour too fast, you're going to end up making a mess. Not because you're going over capacity, but because the oil is not moving down through the frame fast enough. And once you think you have enough in there, we can go ahead and use the dipstick. Now there is a mark right here on the dipstick that lets us know. Now that we completed the oil change, we're done with all the maintenance items on the bike. Got a lot done in this video. We got the headlight installed, the front turn signals, new levers, brake pads. We changed the oil and filter. Now the only thing left to do is get a few little parts that we're waiting on, install the gas tank, the seat, and then we can start it up. Now, I'm not going to start this right now, even though we just changed the oil. We're going to let it sit until we get the tank. And once we do that, we'll start it, let it sit and warm up, check our oil levels then, and go from there. As of right now, we don't have any leaks. There's nothing seeping. That could all change when you start it. I highly doubt it, but it is a possibility. In the next video, we'll have to install the tank, the seat, and our rear taillight, and then this project will be complete. Hopefully we'll get some GoPro footage once we start it and get it going, so I can show you that Vapor by Trail Tech, show you that, how that functions, everything else on it, maybe even hit some trails. If you see any of the tools that I use in this video that you'd like to purchase for yourself, be sure to check out the links below the video in the description. I'll have Amazon links to just about everything I use. I'll also put a link to the Trail Tech Vapor, and I'll try to include some of the parts I've used in this video as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to post those in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.